Welcome everybody to Chapter 2 for Calumet K. I was talking to the director that recommended this to me the other night, and he told me, man, this is fantastic to have this book on audio so that we can learn these lessons for builders, for project managers, for superintendents, and really dive down deep into how to solve problems, drive with urgency, and be excellent at what we do. Let's do this.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Chapter 2. The 5 o'clock whistle had sounded, and Peterson sat on the bench inside the office door, while Bannon washed his hands in the tin basin. The twilight was already settling. Within the shanty, whose dirty small-pane windows serve only to indicate the lesser darkness without, a wall lamp, set in a dull reflector, threw shadows into the corners. "You're coming up with me, ain't you?" said Peterson. "I don't believe you'll get much to eat. Supper's just the pickings from dinner." "Well, the dinner was all right, but I wish you had a bigger bed. I ain't slept for 2 nights. "What's the matter?" "I was on a sleeper last night, and I didn't get in from the Duluth job till 7 o'clock Saturday night, and Brown was after me before I got my supper. Those fellows at the office wouldn't let a man sleep at all if they could help it. Here I'd been working like a workhorse most 5 months on the Duluth house, and the last 3 weeks running night shifts and Sundays, didn't stop to eat half the time, and what does Brown do but, 'Well,' he says, 'how are you feeling, Charlie?' 'Middlin',' said I. 'Are you up to a little job tomorrow?' 'What's that?' I said. 'Seems to me if I've got to go down to the Calumet job Sunday night, I might have an hour or so at home.' 'Well, Charlie,' he says, 'I'm mighty sorry, but you see we've been putting in a big rope drive on a water power plant over at Stillwater. We've got the job on a high bid,' he says, 'and we agreed to have it running on Monday morning. It'll pay the devil with us if we can't make good.' 'What's the matter?' said I. 'Well,' he says, 'Murphy had the job and has balled himself up.' By this time the 2 men had their coats on and were outside the building. 'Let's see,' said Bannon. 'We go this way, don't we?' 'Yes.' There was still the light, flying flakes of snow and the biting wind that came sweeping down from the northwest. The 2 men crossed the siding and, picking their way between the freight cars on the Beltline tracks, followed the path that wound across the stretch of dusty meadow. 'Go ahead,' said Peterson. 'You was telling me about Murphy?' Well, that was the situation. I could see that Brown was up on his hind legs about it, but it made me tired all the same. Of course the job had to be done, but I wasn't letting him have any satisfaction. I told him he ought to give it to somebody else, and he handed me a lot of stuff about my experience. Finally I said, 'You come around in morning, Mr. Brown. I ain't had any sleep to speak of for 3 weeks. I lost 32 pounds, I said, and I ain't going to be bothered tonight.' Well, sir, he kind of shook his head, but he went away, and I got to thinking about it. Long about 7:30 I went down and got a timetable. There was a train to Stillwater at 8:42. "That night?" "Sure. I went over to the shops with an express wagon and got 1,000 feet of rope. Had it in 2 coils so I could handle it, and just made the train. It was a mean night. There was some rain when I started, but you ought to have seen when I got to Stillwater. It was coming down in layers, and mud had sucked your feet down halfway to your knees. There wasn't a wagon anywhere around the station, and the agent wouldn't lift a finger. It was blind dark. I walked off the end of the platform and went plump into a mud hole. I waded up as far as the street crossing where there was an electric light, and ran across the big lumber yard and hung around till I found the night watchman. He was pretty near as mean as the station agent, but he finally let me have a wheelbarrow for $50 and told me how to get the job. He called it 50 rods, but it was a clean mile if it was a step, and most of the way down the track, I wheeled her back to the station, got the rope, and started out. Did you ever try to shove 2 500-foot coils over a mile of cross ties? Well, that's what I did. I scraped off as much mud as I could so I could lift my feet, and bumped over those ties till I thought the teeth were going to be jarred clean out of me. After I got off the track, there was a stretch of mud that left the road by the station up on dry land. There was a fool of a night watchman at the power plant. I reckon he thought I was going to steal the turbines, but he finally let me in, and I set him to starting up the power while I cleaned up Murphy's job and put in a new rope. All by yourself? Asked Peterson. Sure thing. Then I got her going and she worked smooth as grease. When we shut down and I came up to wash my hands, it was about 5 minutes of 3. I said, "Is there a train back to Minneapolis before very long?" "Yes," said the watchman. "The fast freight goes through a little after 3. "How much after?" I said. "Oh," he says, "I could say exactly. 5 or 8 minutes, I guess." I asked when the next train went, and he said there wasn't a regular passenger till 6:55. Well, sir, maybe you think I was going to wait 4 hours in that hole. I went out of that building to beat the limited, never thought of wheelbarrow till I was halfway to the station. And there was some of the liveliest stepping you ever saw. Couldn't see a thing except the light on the rails from the arc lamp up by the station. I got about halfway there, running along between the rails, and banged into a switch, knocked me 7 ways for Sunday. Lost my hat picking myself up, and I couldn't stop to find it." Peterson turned in toward one of the long row of square frame houses. "Here we are," he said. As they went up the stairs, he asked, "Did you make the train?" "Caught the caboose just as she was swinging out. They dumped me out on the front yards, and I didn't get home till about 5 o'clock. I went right to bed, and along about 8 o'clock Brown came in and woke me up. He was feeling pretty nervous. "Say, Charlie," he said, "ain't it time for you to be starting?" "Where to?" said I. "Over to Stillwater," he said. "There ain't any getting out of it. That drive's got to be running tomorrow." "That's all right," said I. "But I'd like to know if I can't have 1 day's rest between jobs, Sunday too. And I lost 32 pounds. Well, sir, he didn't know whether to get hot or not. I guess he thought himself they were kind of rubbing it in. "Look here," he said, "are you going to Stillwater or ain't you?" "No," said I ain't. Not for 100 rope drives." Well, he just got up and took his hat and started out. "Mr. Brown," I said, when he was opening the door, "I lost my hat down at Stillwater last night. I reckon the office ought to stand for it." He turned around and looked at me, and then he grinned. "So you went over?" he said. "I reckoned I did," said I. "What kind of hat did you lose?" he asked, and he grinned again. "I guess it was a silk one, wasn't it?" "Yes," said I, "a silk hat. Something about $8. "Did he mean he'd give you a silk hat?" asked Peterson. "Couldn't say." They were sitting in the 10 by 12 room that Peterson rented for $1 a week. Bannon had the one chair and was sitting tipped back against the washstand. Peterson sat on the bed. Bannon had thrown his overcoat over the foot of the bed and had dropped his bag on the floor by the window. "Ain't it time to eat, Pete?" he said. "Yes, there's the bell." The significance of Bannon's arrival and the fact that he was planning to stay was slow in coming to Peterson. After supper, when they had returned to the room, his manner showed constraint. Finally, he said, "Is there any fuss up at the office?" "What about?" "Why, do they want to rush the job or something?" "Well, we haven't got such a lot of time. You see, it's November already." "What's the hurry all of a sudden? They didn't say nothing to me." "I guess you haven't been crowding it very hard, have you?" Peterson flushed. "I've been working harder than I ever did before," he said. "If it wasn't for the cribbing being held up like this, I'd have all the cupola halfway done before now. I've been playing in hard luck." Bannon was silent for a moment. Then he said, "How long do you suppose it would take to get the cribbing down from Ledyard?" "Not very long if it was rushed. I should think a couple days or maybe 3, and they'll rush it all right when they can get the cars. You see, it's only 10 or 11 hours up there, passenger schedule, and they could run it right into the job over the belt line. It's the belt line that crosses the bridge, is it?" "Yes." Bannon spread his legs apart and drummed on the front of his chair. "What's the other line?" he asked. "The 4-track line." "That's the CNSC. We don't have nothing to do with them." They were both silent for a time. The flush had not left Peterson's face. His eyes were roving over the carpet, lifting now and then to Bannon's face with a quick glance. "Guess I'll shave," said Bannon. "Do you get hot water here?" "Why, I don't know," replied Peterson. "I generally use cold water. The folks here ain't very obliging. Kind of poor, you know." Bannon was rummaging on his grip for a shaving kit. "You never saw a razor like that, Pete," he said. "Just heft it once. Light, ain't it?" "Light, ain't it?" said Peterson, taking it in his hand. "You bet it's light. And look here." He reached for it and drew it back and forth over the palm of his hands. "That's the only stropping I ever get it." "Don't you have to hone it?" "No, sir. It's never been touched to a stone or leather. You just get up and try it once. Those whiskers of yours won't look any the worse for chopping." Peterson laughed and lathered his face while Bannon put an edge on the razor, testing it with a hair. "Say, that's about the best yet," said Peterson after the first stroke. "You're right, it is. Bannon looked on for a few minutes, then he took a railroad pathfinder from his grip and rapidly turned the pages. Peterson saw it in the mirror and asked between strokes, "What are you going to do? Looking up trains?" While Peterson was splashing in the washbowl, Bannon took his turn in the mirror. "How's the Duluth job getting on?" asked Peterson when Bannon had finished and was wiping his razor. "All right, most done. Just a little millwright work left and some cleaning up." "There ain't any marine leg on the house, is there?" "No." "How big a house is it?" 800,000 bushels. "That's so. Ain't half as big as this one, is it?" "Guess not. Built for the same people, though, Page & Company." "They must be going in pretty heavy." "They are. There's a good deal of talk about it. Some of the boys up at the office say there's going to be fun with December wheat before they get through with it. It's been going up pretty steadily since the end of September. It was 74 3/8 Saturdays in Minneapolis. It ain't got up quite so high down there yet, but the boys say there's going to be a lot of money in it for somebody." "Be kind of a good thing to get in on, eh?" said Peterson cautiously. "Maybe, for those that like to put money in wheat. I've got no money for that sort of thing myself." "Yes, of course," was Peterson's quick reply. "A fellow doesn't want to run them kind of chances. I don't believe in it myself. The fact is this, and this is just between you and me, mind you. I don't know anything about it. It's only what I think. Somebody's buying a lot of December wheat, or the price wouldn't keep going up. And I've got a notion that whoever he is, it's Page & Company that's selling it to him. That's just putting two and two together, you see. It's the real grain that the Pages handle, and if they sell to a man, it means they're going to make a mighty good try at unloading it on him and making him pay for it. That's all I know about it. I see the Pages selling, or what looks mighty like it, and I see them beginning to look around and talk on the quiet about crowding things a little in their new houses, and it just strikes me that there's likely to be a devil of a lot of wheat coming into Chicago before the year runs out. And if that's so, why, there's got to be a place to put it when it gets here." "Do they have to have an elevator to put it in?" asked Peterson. "Can't they deliver it in the cars? I don't know much about that side of the business." "I should say not. The Board of Trade won't recognize grain as delivered until it has been inspected and stored in a registered house." "When would the house have to be ready?" "Well, if I'm right, if they're going to put December wheat in this house, they'll have to have it in before the last day of December." "We couldn't do that," said Peterson, "if the cribbing was here." Bannon, who had stretched out on the bed, swung his feet around and sat up. The situation was not easy, but he had been sent to Calumet to get the work done in time, and he meant to do it. "Now, about this cribbing, Pete," he said. "We've got to have it before we can touch the annex?" "I guess that's about it," Peterson replied. "I've been figuring a little on this bill. I take it there's something over 2 million feet altogether, is that right?" "It's something like that. Couldn't say exactly. Max takes care of the lumber." Bannon's brows came together. "You ought to know a little more about this yourself, Pete. You're the man that's building the house." "I guess I've been pushing it along as well as anyone could," said Peterson sullenly. "That's all right. I ain't hitting at you. I'm talking business, that's all. Now, if Vogel's right, this cribbing ought to have been here 14 days ago. 14 days tomorrow." Peterson nodded. "That's just 2 weeks of lost time. How you've been planning to make that up?" Why, I reckon I can put things together as soon as I get the cribbing." "Look here, Pete. The office has contracted to get this house done by a certain date. They've got to pay $750 for every day that we run over that date. There's no getting out of that cribbing or no cribbing. When they're seeing $10,000 or $20,000 slipping out of their hands, do you think they're going to thank you for telling them the G&M Railroad couldn't get the cars? They don't care what's the matter. All they want you is to do the work on time. Now look here, Charlie. Hold on, Pete, don't get mad. It's facts, that's all. Here's these 2 weeks gone. You see that all right enough. Now the way this work's laid out, a man's got to make every day count right from the start if he wants to land on his feet when the house is done. Maybe you think somebody up in the sky is going to hand you down a present of 2 extra weeks so the lost time won't count. That would be all right, only it ain't very likely to happen." "Well," said Peterson, "what are you getting at? What do you want me to do? Perhaps you think it's easy." "No, I don't, but I'll tell you what to do. In the first place, you want to quit this getting out on the job and doing a laborer's work. The office is paying out good money to the men that should do that. You know how to lay a corbel, but just now you couldn't tell me how much cribbing was coming. You're paid to direct this whole job and to know all about it, not to lay corbels. If you put in half a day swinging a sledge out there in the spouting house, how are you going to know the lumber bills tally and the carpenters ain't making mistakes, and that the timber's piled right. Here today you had a dozen men throwing away their time moving a lot of timber that ought to have been put in the right place when it first came in. Peterson was silent. Now tomorrow, Pete, as soon as you've got the work moving along, you'd better go over to the electric light company and see about having the whole ground wired for arc lamps, so we can be ready to put on a night shift the minute the cribbing comes in. You want to crowd 'em too. They ought to have it ready in 2 days. Bannon sat for a moment, then he arose and looked at his watch. I'm going to leave you, Pete, he said as he put on his collar. Where are you going? I've got to get up to the city to make the 10 o'clock train. I'm going up to Ledyard to get the cribbing. Be back in a couple of days. He threw his shaving kit into his grip, put on his overcoat, said goodbye, and went out. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2. So this book, the middle chapters kind of take you through a story. There's a lesson in each chapter, but it gets better and better, and as we go along, we continue to learn lots of lessons. So I hope you're getting through my narration. Man, I'm not playing the victim, but it's tough to narrate a story like this, especially when it was written like 100 years ago. So here's some reflections, and I hope you can learn from it, whether you're a project manager or especially if you're a superintendent. So here's a section. It says, all by yourself? Asked Peterson. Sure thing. Then I got her going, and she worked smooth as grease. So basically, the interaction that's taking place in here is that Peterson is amazed at the things that Bannon is able to do. Now, I'm not going to gently or gladly talk about the fact that McBride and Company is sending Bannon all over the place without any sleep or work-life balance. You know, that's what happened back in the day. And so nowadays, we need to make sure that we're caring for families and having a good balance, a good blend there. But I know that there are many times in my life where, whether it's working nights at Intel or putting up a tower crane or doing something that's difficult, we've got to get out there, get in the mud, and string that line just like Bannon did, and really just be willing to work all night and grunt and grind and just get it done. And I do want to say that if anybody's not willing to do that, they're probably not suited to be a superintendent. So in this example, I'd like to just take the good things from the story, in the sense that there are moments where we just have to get down to work and get it done. I don't think we need to do that all the time. We need to, have a good balance in life. But when it's time in construction to get it done, a superintendent leans in and gets it done just like Bannon did. Here's another section. I guess you haven't been crowding it very hard, have you? That's when Peterson said, well, they haven't told me much about it. So there's no such thing as the superintendent being a victim, meaning, oh, they didn't tell me that, or they didn't make it clear here, or they didn't do that. It's a superintendent's job to be curious, to know, to ask questions, to be clear, to request clarity, to know what their customer expects, and to understand the context. And so Peterson really needed to know what was going on. And when he said, what's the hurry all of a sudden? They didn't say nothing to me. Then that's when Bannon said, I guess you haven't been crowding it very hard, have you? So the message is, we do need to crowd it. We need to get the information. We need to ask the question. We need to know the conditions of satisfaction. We need to know what the owner wants. We need to know the context. And then Pete said, I've been working harder than I ever did before. He said, if it wasn't for the cribbing being held up like this, I'd have the cupola half done before now. I've been playing in hard luck. Again, Peterson has not been playing in hard luck. He's been playing in normal day-to-day conditions in construction, and he's failing to overcome. He's failing to artfully attack the situation. He's failing to be master. And he's using excuses. He's saying if it wasn't for the cribbing, well, is procurement, is cribbing, is the supply chain not under a superintendent's command and responsibility? And the answer is, it absolutely is. And also, Peterson has a misunderstanding. He says, I've been working harder than I ever did before. That's how we get into construction. We work hard, and as a laborer, we get promoted, but we can't continue to do that. We have to start to work with our brains. We have to start to direct traffic. We have to start leading instead of doing the doing. And so really, Peterson is still just really a laborer or a carpenter, because he thinks that he gets merits from working hard, not working smart. In fact, motion, which is what he's doing, is waste. It's one of the 8 wastes. Motion and transportation, movement, these things are wastes. And the sooner that Peterson can understand that, the better a leader, a project builder, or a superintendent he's going to be. Here's another section. We've got to have it before we can touch the annex. So that kind of instinct, that kind of knowledge is the superintendent's basically art form. It's their responsibility. It's the superintendent, it's the builder, it's the key, insightful project manager in the room that should be able to say, in order for us to do this, we have to have this, and keep the team's focus on the critical path of the project. Another section. I guess I've been pushing it along as well as anyone could, said Peterson sullenly. Again, there's the victim mentality. He is not conquering his situation, and he's showing a bad character in this situation. That's just 2 weeks of lost time. How you've been planning to make that up. Man, I can't tell you how many times superintendents will lose days or weeks and not be productively paranoid enough to immediately fix it, and they don't ever answer the question, how are we going to make that up? I think they rely on wishful thinking to see if they can make it up, and they're not going to be able to. And that's why Peterson said, why, I reckon I can put things together as soon as I get the cribbing. Again, he's waiting. And as General Patton said, it's only attack, and attack some more. Nothing has ever been successfully defended. There's only attack, and attack some more. And a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week. And that's why he said, look here, Pete, the office is contracted to get this house done by a certain date. They've got to pay $750 for every day that we run over that day. There's no getting out of that, cribbing or no cribbing. When they're seeing $10,000 or $20,000 slipping out of their hands, do you think they're going to thank you for telling them that the G&M Railroad couldn't get cars? They don't care what's the matter. All they want of you is to do the work on time. Bottom line is, it's the project management teams to figure this out. It's the team's job. So the superintendent and the PM better get to problem solving. There's no such thing as telling the office or the company that you work for, I can't do it, I'm a victim, wah. It's not going to work. We have to overcome. We have to be creatures to act and not creatures to be acted upon. Here's another section. Here's these 2 weeks gone. You see that all right enough. Now the way this work's laid out, a man's got to make every day count right from the start if he wants to land on his feet when the house is done. In that sense of urgency, not every superintendent understands that. We have to get out of the ground quickly. We have to make sure that we're aggressively moving forward when there's just 1 or 2 trades on site, and we can actually accelerate things. Once we have a bunch of finishes and we have 40 trades on site, it's not as easy. Maybe you think somebody up in the sky is going to hand you down a present of 2 extra weeks so the lost time won't count. That would be all right, only it ain't very likely to happen. Well, said Peterson, what are you getting at? What do you want me to do? Perhaps you think it's easy. That's what we hear in the industry all the time. If there's a superintendent that isn't trained, if there's a superintendent that doesn't have drive, a superintendent that isn't problem solving, a superintendent that isn't reaching out and asking for help, that's widening his circle or her circle, this situation permeates those victim-type personalities. What do you think? It's easy? In fact, one time I was with a field director, and this field director has built mega projects all his career. He went to a job one time and suggested some alterations to how they were building tilt panels, and the superintendent that was failing was like, hey, you don't know what it's like. You've never done something like this. And my field director buddy was like, tilt panels? I haven't done tilt panels? And started giggling. And that's just something that people say when they're being a victim. Do you think it's easy? Well, no, it's easy, but a superintendent's job isn't easy. And they, the office, you should expect of yourself that you figure it out and get it done. And then Bannon says this, no, I don't, but I tell you what to do. In the first place, you want to quit this getting on the job and doing a laborer's work. The office is paying out good money to the men that should be doing that. You know how to lay a corbel, but just now you couldn't tell me how much cribbing was coming. Now, I want to tell you a secret. If you see a superintendent doing work, if you see a superintendent on the forklift, if you see a superintendent spraying down the water on the site and spraying down the dirt, if you see a superintendent going to Home Depot, they are running away from the project just like Peterson was. Peterson was out there doing laborer's work because he's running away. He fixed it in his mind to where he could give an excuse, not have it be his fault, and just run away to the things that he knew how to do and back into his comfort zone. If he was outside of his comfort zone and doing what a superintendent actually should be doing, he would be problem solving. And so that is a key to success. You see a super, you see a foreman, you see any kind of leader running to Home Depot, they're running away. Now tomorrow, Pete, as soon as you've got the work moving along, you'd better go over to the electric light company and see about having the whole ground wired up for arc lamps so we can be ready to put on a night shift the minute the cribbing comes in. Why didn't Peterson think of that? Why are we always so hesitant to think about additional crews or calling for resources or being focused and swarming an area or sequencing things differently. I mean, there's probably 8 out of 10 times that a superintendent will not think of that just because they're not driven and they're not getting creative, and they need to. So Bannon gets there, he sees it immediately, and in 2 days we can have lights out. It probably, according to Pete, it probably would have looked like a 2 or 3 week job, not even worth it. But Bannon's like, we have to aggressively get this forward. So we have to have that kind of drive, and we have to start being productively paranoid to change the tide early and not wishfully think that it will all magically go well at the end of the job. If we're pushing over 10 to 20% in the beginning of the job, what makes us think that we're not going to push over 10 to 20% at the end? I'm going to leave you, Pete, he said as he put on his collar. Where are you going? I've got to get up to the city to make the 10 o'clock train. I'm going up to Ledyard to get the cribbing. Be back in a couple of days. He threw a shaving kit into his grip, put on his overcoat, said goodnight, and went out. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that Pete didn't even think about going out of town to figure out where that cribbing was. He didn't even think about going up there, and that's his job. He should have his foreman leading the work. He could have left the lumber checker on the project site to do the things for him. He needed to be making sure that the supply chain was functioning properly and doing the right thing. And so the fact that this caught him by surprise is a surprise to me. And it really is the difference between a proficient project team or superintendent or PM and one that's inexperienced. If we have materials that need to be tracked down, we dig into that supply chain all the way back. We go make visits. We fly over to a different state to figure it out. Heck, we might even go overseas to figure out where this stuff is coming from. We have to know what's going on. We cannot trust somebody. We cannot wishfully think. We cannot hope for the best. We have to be productively paranoid and figure it out. And so that's why Bannon was heading to the city to go up to Ledyard to see where that stinking cribbing was. And you'll find out in the rest of the chapters that this was a good decision. So at the end of the day, my comment is that this superintendent, Pete, is very inexperienced, doesn't know his job, is still acting as a laborer or a carpenter, and not leading and getting out of his comfort zone. At the end of the day, a good superintendent will push out of his comfort zone, her comfort zone, and really go do those hard things that nobody else wants to do or gets to do. A leader gets to do the hard things. So when I see people calling themselves superintendents, but they're not willing to schedule, they're not willing to plan, they're not willing to troubleshoot, they don't take care of roadblocks, they don't have hard conversations, they don't hold their trades accountable, are they a superintendent? And my answer would be no.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.